What is up? I'm Miguel Antonio, and you are listening to the Live and Create podcast. It's where I interview artists and entrepreneurs about what it means to live a great life and create great things. And before we jump into the podcast, I'd love for you to check out my band, Run With It. Here's a clip from our song, I Need a Light.
It was the middle of the night. My only friend was the highway. I just started to drive. No direction, only miles spent. I was losing my mind. Nothing more than tears and shaking. Where the moon was so bright. We used to spin and spin. I see my darkest days, see my darkest days. I see my darkest days, see my darkest days. I need a light, so bright and the sun seems dim. I need something that will not fade, held tight like the hand of a friend. I need someone that won't run away.
If you like what you heard, make sure you check us out at Run With It Band, at Run With It Band, everywhere you follow people at, or go to runwithitband.net. It'll take you to all the different links you want to go to, and there'll be a little button you can click for booking information. Now for today's podcast.
The Live and Create podcast.
So for you, you have a crazy story starting out in California in the evangelical world, all fast forward all the way to the mayhem, the musical mayhem and genius that is Flat Susan.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool getting to know you, like, I guess technically backstage. It was off stage. There wasn't a backstage, but
Yeah.
so my story seemed to intersect with your story in similar ways. And it's funny because when I talk about religion, I always have to be careful in the Midwest, because I feel like if you bring up, negative comments about religion, like, people get really weird really fast. And so I remember sitting there at the table, we're talking right before a show, and I'm kind of like telling my own story, but trying to like cloud it, because I'm like, I don't know who's at this table. And I noticed you kind of threw out like this nugget, and then I threw out a little nugget. And then after a while, I'm like, wait a minute. I think we have been in
It's
this.
like, are you cool? Are you going to be cool about what
I think you're cool about this. We can talk about this. But yeah, that's where I wanted to start. If you're cool with it,
Sure.
of just your journey from the evangelical world. And I know for a listener, they probably heard me talk about it before, where I was in the evangelical church leader doing all that, and then finally walking away from it and what that meant, how hard that was. But you were on a journey of, it sounds like self-discovery, and finally learning how to be fully true to yourself in a sense, not to like minimize your story in any way, but yeah, what did that look like for you? As you left California and kind of went through this evangelical world and ending up in Kansas City.
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting, even just to touch on what you were saying of like the safety of talk, like, oh, this person's new. Can I tell them the truth about who I am or what I think, And so it was like, and I'm so conditioned to that, because I've like been on this journey of like my own reclamation, if you will, for like years at this point. So it's so refreshing. Like, I remember leaving that night, like after the show, I went home and talked to my girlfriend. I was like, dang, me and Miguel had this really cool conversation. And
that was the same for me. I went home. I was like, Jenny, like, seriously, I was talking to Amanda, and she's telling me this and this. And she knows for me how great that is to meet people who feel like they can understand in some sense.
Yeah. And it's a lot, there's so, to talk about, I mean, especially in our generation, so many of us have had, I affectionately coin us like the youth group generation, because like so many of us had like did something with like youth group, or like went to a friend's camp or this or something. It was like so centralized on like, let's get the youth in our, like, you know, our, I don't know, I guess evangelical culture growing up. And so it's so interesting, and yeah, finding people on the
That's
other
how it
side.
started
But
for me too. Yeah, as a youth group friend of mine was like, "Hey, you know that girl Jennifer you like? She's at youth group. Why don't you get like?" I wonder how many people came into Christianity
oh,
because
I'm trying to go get
they
that
thought
girl at
someone
youth
was
group.
super hot, and they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna go." Next thing you know, you're like falling out, speaking in tongues and shit. Like,
I know. Who knows? Maybe subconsciously that's why I went to youth group and didn't even know.
right.
But yeah, it was like, you know, growing up, like, you know, I went to a Christian school, K through 12, kind of affiliated with church. And then single parent household, just my brother and I and my mom, you know, kind of growing up. And I was always like, was very involved in music, and was singing in church, like played drums. I was like the main drummer in the praise band in like 7th grade. And I was like,
Nice.
oh, cool. So, you know, so many of us get those roots of, you know, singing gospel and growing up in church with music. And there's such a foundation there that is beautiful, that I'm so thankful for too. When it comes to like, what are you trying to access when you're going towards music? You know, is it like,
Yeah.
to me, that's always been something, because I've always been such a seeker of like, what am I accessing here in like a internal way, you know? And so, yeah, I was involved in that a lot. Was kind of like I was on the praise team in my high school, because it was, you know, we had like chapel every week. And then I got really involved in this organization called Teen Mania Ministries, and started doing youth like mission trips with them. And then they have this they're no longer, but had this year-long program called the Honor Academy. And it was like super intense. Like, let's, you know, take a year and like dedicate yourself to really being like an evangelical warrior, and what that looks like. And it was kind of pitched more as like a leadership academy too. A lot of like, you know, how do I
Influence,
formulate who I am? Yeah,
and
to be able to, you know, be this like in this like leadership capacity, you know,
right.
for the body of Christ too. So was very into that, and you know, singing there, and kind of like mentoring. And then
Well, I was blown away when you said YWAM, because I was like, what? Like, I
yeah,
knew
YWAM was
nobody
like right
else
down the street.
in my
Yeah.
life doesn't know shit about.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, that's where, because Acquire the Fire, I'd share with that. That's where I became a believer, you know, and that's where I started the journey with it again. Yeah. Sorry to interject there, but that was like, that blew me away in our conversation as well. Like, just someone else knowing that world, and it's its own culture in a way.
It really is. Yeah. Yeah. Its own culture, its own vocabulary, its own everything. And so it's like, it is finding somebody that's like, oh, wow, me too. It's like, that's why the Me Too movement was so profound, you know, because it's like,
Right.
in any aspect of your life where you have deep either trauma or joy, when you find somebody that says me too, I know what you're talking about. It's like so profound. And so, yeah, went through that process. So when I went to that ministry, like didn't go to college, you know, kind of went there and was like, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to like really wanted to pursue kind of like this radical life of evangelical service. And long story short, kind of, you know, figured out I had a thing for same sex, which is not something that is very, yeah, it was like, pump the brakes. Everything about my life was like, so I was like, okay, I'm doing this and this. And it was like, everything was mapped out in this path. And it was like, okay, cool. I just thought I knew what was happening. And growing up in the church and so hyper evangelical, it was like, I was so homophobic before I even had any idea that was like maybe a part of my life. And like looking back now, I'm just like, oh, we knew like we knew.
Like, oh yeah, that's right. You did go to youth group to see Jennifer.
Yeah, I was like, hello, is anybody but that's another thing too of why I'm like, so I think representation matters so much in so many ways too. And you know, in that's a whole other podcast in itself. But it was just so interesting of like when I basically fell in love with another woman and I was like 19 and had no idea what was happening. And, you know, things kind of progressed with us. And then I ended up getting kicked out of this ministry and was like, what do I do now? And, then it was like this whole shift in my relationship with God of like, okay, now the only thing that matters is like me not being gay.
It's like, how do
So
I fix this,
yeah.
essentially?
Yeah. So I was like, okay, well, here is this massive sin that has been like realized upon myself. And now how do I get it out? I know what I want to do. Here's my path. Here's all these things. And like, I
Yeah.
had such this, you know, deep connection there that it was like, okay, well, this can't be if this is going to be. So I ended up moving to Kansas City to get involved with IHOP KC, the International House of Prayer out here. And, huge ministry. They've gone through a lot of scandal this last year of, you know, with such a tragic thing of so common with leadership coming into abuse and scandal and all of those things. But
Yeah, abuse,
I would,
scandal, murder, everything. It's wild to watch what's happened there.
yeah,
That's for sure.
it's pretty crazy. And it's so wild to know too, of like nothing in me like wishes any ill will on like so many of us that were involved, and like, you know, all of the people that are still there and still so genuinely seeking and finding, you know. That's why the thing too is like there's so many ways to go about this, right? Like there's so many ways to find God, if you will. There's so many ways to find yourself, and there's so many ways to look at other people and have an ego as if they are doing it incorrectly.
Right.
And, you know,
It's so true. That's because I went hardcore like atheist, and the further I went, we spent basically, I left the church, spent 2 years on the road with the band, and explored like this almost militant, angry atheist like version of Miguel, and realized it became just as dogmatic and like closed off as what I was trying to run from. It's like I just pendulum swung that thing all the way over, but then finding out, you know, where, like you said, the different paths that people can take to understand themselves.
Yeah, that's been the biggest thing for me at this point is like, there's such a, I don't know. I don't even, it almost, because it's so funny to me because I'm catching myself trying to like denounce this arrogance while it feels like I was going to arrogantly say something else. So I'm like, it's in me, it's everywhere.
I get that.
But
well, you were in a training program for that, right? We went through that.
Yeah, because I was about to say something so much so along the lines of like, even in that like camaraderie of finding of like, okay, well, yes, there are people that like, it's different when you find people are like, oh, I go to church on Sunday or this, or like I grew up in the church, or you had people that were like, gave like everything about their life was forsaken only to be in an extreme ministry. And like, for like, there's such a level of different experience when you find somebody who is like, oh yeah, I grew up in church. The levels of the levels of what that can mean is so vast.
I always describe it as that meme. I forget what movie it's from, but where they're like I'm getting $500, and they're like, you got $500, and like I only got 100, and then someone's like, you guys got paid. Like that's how I always feel like on so many things. Like when it came to like sex, especially, like because for me that was the big no. Like, and so like my wife was the first person I ever slept with, and you know, so it was like that was 29 years, but then the psyche of like holding yourself back, which you probably understand way more in the sense of at least a heterosexual relationship could be acknowledged in the church, right? Sure. It was like everyone else, I was like, you guys were having sex, like you guys were all drinking, you guys were all going out, you guys were thinking for yourselves, like what the fuck?
Yeah.
And like stepping back and being like, was I the only idiot like doing this thing? Is what it felt like. So
yeah, like how was I so wrapped up and just like my whole hyper fixation was just this is the way, this is the um the radical path of pursuit, which is such a big thing. And so it's like within that there's such a, in these more so like um supercharged groups, I guess, that I found myself involved in, there was such a groundwork laid of, you are the tip of the sword. You are the elite Christians.
Yeah.
You are the ones that have forsaken everything.
The
that
Navy
have
SEALs of
that
of
yeah,
Christianity,
you are
baby.
you're the Green Berets, baby. Giving up everything, and the doing the 21-day fasts, doing these crazy things that are just, and it's like, so you get addicted to that
It's
too,
true.
right? Like there's like, I've had to acknowledge later on, even now, it's like I still find myself realizing that I'm feeding that thing that got planted in me in other ways. With like, even now I find myself getting like, even in other ways of like spirituality that I've found, or that I'm like, oh, I feel I'm very into this, or like this is what connects me. And um I
Like
think
in
that
a
I have,
sense of finding the same intensity. Like basically there's this intensity inside you and you feel like you have to attach it somewhere. Is that the experience?
yeah. And there is this level too that is like, I got to tell people how I did it, because I think this might be the way,
Right.
you know
Well, there
and
is
I think,
something that feels good about that. Like there, I
mhm,
mean, legitimately, there's times to this day, and I'm almost coming up on a decade of being away from
yeah,
that, where I kind of miss that. And then then I have to ask myself, why do you miss that? Like, was that great
mhm.
for your ego? Was that, and like go deeper into that. But yeah, there is something about being the guide in a way that when people come to you and say, like, thank you so much, you helped me through that, or yeah, and it may feed weird strange parts of our psyche. That's for sure.
And keep you in like, and I think there were things about that too that kept me so stuck in a place that I was like, I was so signed up for the system
Mm-hmm.
that that it was like, as a mentor, or like as a, like, leader in that system, it's like you're so trained to, like, from an early age, you're so trained to deny those feeler things that flare up your internal sensors that are like, is that bullshit? I don't know. Is that,
You're like,
should we
no, doubt
question
your
that?
doubts. Doubt
But
your
it's
doubts.
like from day one, you're programmed to believe the leader, fucking follow the mission, basically,
Right.
right? To it. Oh, we've almost died.
Good
But
save.
so so it's like, you almost get so trained, and like, and then even addicted to the like furthering the message, regardless of like, okay, well, maybe I'm thinking this, but like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
so small in regards to what the overall vision of the message or the vision of the ministry is. So if this guy's doing this weird thing, then like, but the overall message is still good, right? So if this guy's over here being weird, or like duplicitous, or living in a way that is completely contradictory to the things that he's saying, the message that he's saying is still good, right? So then
Right.
I have to, what's the word I'm looking for? I have to like satiate people's thoughts or whatever about
Yeah.
the guy that's giving the
Oh, blah, blah.
message, but then, but the message, so it's like, even
Mm-hmm.
going in that, then it's like you become this like master of like manipulation without
Yep.
even realizing it, because you
Mm-hmm.
have these, you are now becoming this shepherd of people who are asking you, right?
Yep.
Is this the way? And then it's like, okay, well, then you lead them for long enough and you're like, shit, what if this isn't the way? How do I tell them now that I like, I think that I might have been wrong. I
It's
think
like
they might
Forrest
like,
Gump. When Forrest Gump got to the end of running, like, do you remember? Did you ever watch that? Am I
oh
dating
yeah,
myself now? Okay, just checking.
no,
But
love
like
that
when
movie.
he's like running and gets to the end and he looks like Jesus got his, hair and he's just like stops running and he's like, I'm done. And everyone else is like, well, what the fuck are we supposed to do now? It's like there
Yeah,
is an aversion to wanting to be that person, you know?
yeah.
I wonder is like, so for example, with the same idea, that I've wrestled with. So we're getting into like keynote concerts where I actually like almost like a version of public speaking where I'm essentially like telling stories of our songs, but then applying them to a certain group. But part of me has always had this hesitancy now to get into public speaking because I'm like, if I say what you're kind of like what you're saying, if I say this thing and I'm pushing this one topic, what if it doesn't interest me in a year? Can I change my mind? What if I don't believe it in a year? What if I, but learning to let that go, because that should be the evolution, right? For us. Like, I think so differently, but
Yeah.
I still feel trapped in that. It's interesting to hear your perspective like that. I wonder if it just got so trained, or maybe it's part of a personality type. I don't know, maybe both. It gets so ingrained in you, like it has to be this. You cannot, like kill anything else that's outside of these boundaries.
Yeah. And then there's still that, like, that weight. I mean, because I've loved being like when you asked me to do this, podcast, I've had the privilege of, doing several this last year of just like really, connecting with people that were connecting to, my story and things like that. And then it's like, I had to get myself to a place to where even like, if I go back and like, even over just like a year of like looking back at those podcasts, I can catch myself and listening to them of like, oh no, I said such a definitive and bold statement to where who I was speaking to in the podcast, like who I was talking to, I know that they didn't need more context to what I said.
Yeah.
But then I listened back to it and I was like, if nobody has ever had a conversation with me or whatever, like this is going to sound like completely different than what I meant. Or if they don't know that I have this history with so adamantly seeking the like truth about the person of Jesus. Like so many people can take everything that I say as whatever they want to take it as,
Right.
and that fear of, oh man. And then there's that thing of like, I have to be, if I'm not willing to come on this podcast and talk to you about how I feel like I may have been wrong in some of the avenues of my pursuit of my closeness and relationship with God, or even in the ways that I would have pursued Jesus specifically. Like, if I can't come on this podcast and say, damn, I could wake up tomorrow and have a vision and something could, like, some sort of transcendental thing could happen to where I now think that the past 10 years of my life, as I've told people that I thought that I was incorrect before, I have to be open enough to say, damn, wrong again. It really was that, right?
Well,
Like,
and
if I can't.
I wonder if the fear, we talked about this a bit too. For the listener, I apologize. We're just kind of, in a sense, like revisiting. So you're hearing us be like, yeah, we talked about that. We talked about, but it was good.
Again,
good
doing
shit.
it again. There's
Yeah.
so much context
But
here.
but the thank you. Yes, good call. Right. I felt like I had to explain that.
Yeah.
But I wonder too, the fear of that, and I'm really processing out loud because you got my brain turning of where I'm at as well. But there's so much cost. Like, I lost my job. I lost almost all my friends. I've had family members look at me differently. Like, I know, went through a lot of that as well.
Yeah.
And then to stake your life on yet another thing. And then all your relationships and all your community and everything else, all in another thing. That can be scary. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just got my brain turning, because I think I'm kind of reflecting where, even when it comes to the music community that I love and have a lot of friends in, I do see like that hesitancy to like still like, well, I don't know. Like, it's like I almost have to force myself sometimes to go out because I'm like, I don't know. But I do wonder, does it stem from that in there? For you, you went to this, getting back to that story, you discovered like I had this great sin I had to get rid of, and that led you into conversion therapy, right? Was that was that at IHOP, or was that just like whole other
Yeah, it was
thing?
kind of like it wasn't IHOP sanctioned. It was through a ministry called like Desert Streams, Living Waters. So it was like IHOP adjacent, but it wasn't like an IHOP program. But yeah, so it was in the mix.
Yeah. So how long was that process till you just realized, no, this is who I am? And what finally clicked for you to get to that place?
Yeah, well, so it was 2000, like January of 2007, that I got kicked out of Teen Mania when I was in Texas.
Okay.
And I thought, I was like, I had gotten asked to stay on as leadership. I was certain that I was going to be on staff next. Like my ladder up was like set.
Right.
And then that happened, and then I got kicked out, and then it was, well, what the fuck just happened? Did I like? Was that just? I just got weird with a girl. Like, what's going on? Like, and then it was like the floodgates of like, oh, I had to look at the inventory of my whole life, and then they came, and then it wasn't initially like, ah! It wasn't initially just like a gay thing. It was we're going to put you on a growth plan, the two of you. Like, you are so codependent on each other that it has turned into this unhealthy physical relationship that is now like, so your same-sex physicality that's happening between the two of you is just stemming from this codependent fuckery that's going on with you, basically.
Interesting.
And so then that was like, oh, okay, wow, okay. So then it was like, okay, let's just try not to be codependent, and then we can be friends again. And then it like turned into this, well, okay, I realized that's not it. And then it was like, all of a sudden I realized that I was in love with her. And then I was like, oh my God, that's what this is. That's what this is. Like, and that's so, I still look back on that now. I'm just like, at this ache of like, man, the first time you fall in love and you realize you're in love, it's like, it should be this beautiful, like, oh my gosh, I think I'm in love with this person. To me, I was like, oh my God, I'm in love with a woman. I was like,
like, this sucks.
That's what that feels like. Right. Like, what do I do now? And so it's just like, so even in the midst of that, then it was like, okay, what's the most extreme course of action I can take to get the quickest result, to get the, the deepest thing. And like, that's another thing that's so programmed in me too.
Intensity.
Like, extreme as possible, as forsake everything. Let's get everything out of you and do it as quick as we can, because we're as dedicated as we can. And, and so, yeah, so the conversion therapy was just like the way, it was like, okay, sign up for this. And it's like it's the curriculum for like the most debased sinners. It's like, let's go pedophiles, let's go rapists, let's go homos, let's go, you know what I mean? It's like that crux of,
unfortunately, like, I being in that world, I knew so many people. That's how they said, like, gay was like a half step from pedophile, and they were just like at a half step from Satan. It was wild.
Being gay is your doobie. That's your gateway doobie for sure.
What was it, Baptist? What would they say? Premarital sex might lead to dancing, so be careful.
Yeah.
Because they really hated dancing. But so you're in this intense program. And IHOP, I know, is very intense in general, as intense culture. And was there like someone who came along that kind of helped, like, give you permission, or did you find?
Yeah, there was. It was both, and I, going through that, and then I was singing on staff on the night watch, and I was like on the worship teams finally of like, it's even more now, but when I was there, it was like broadcast 24/7 to like 150 countries, like that was like the place to go if you were a worship leader. It was like IHOP, Bethel, and Hillsong were like the top three of like my like meccas, if you will, to like go to play music at like an elite level. And I was doing it, you know, I was there and I was in it. And then it was like, we had a team meeting one night, and my worship leader at the time, and she's so fantastic and was such a great mentor to me in a lot of ways, but she mentioned something of like, and in her way, what she was saying was like, she had no idea that it was going to be like the tip of the iceberg of like my understanding. But it was something that had to do with like, you know, like if Jesus is truly fully God as well as fully man, then like, even though he said no to sin, like as God, he probably didn't have the desire to sin. And like something like that. And it was like,
Right.
so being fully God and fully man, even though he was tempted with sin as a man, like he denied sin. Like, this is how I'm hearing it. So it's like,
Right.
okay, so then who cares? Nobody gives you a fuck. Then who cares? That's like, you could put like, at that point, I was like, then what's the fucking point? I'm literally like every single night, I'm like crying myself to sleep, grasping
Right.
to my brother in Jesus, who has walked through every single thing I've walked through or could ever imagine to, who knows my pain in every place that I've ever been through, because he overcame it. And like, that is what I'm drastically holding on to. And I'm like, if you're telling me the motherfucker that overcame the shit that I'm like literally dying over every day didn't even want the stuff that he overcame, who cares?
There wasn't an actual Me Too happening. It wasn't like me. You're like, Jesus, you're full of shit because you're not Me Too in there.
It was, no, that's the perfect way. It was like, in that moment, it felt like my Me Too from him got taken away.
Yeah.
And that
makes
like
complete sense.
I was like, oh my God. And then it was like this tink on like this glass house, you know, where the tip of the iceberg that was just thing, and everything just kind of crumbled for me in the what and the why as how I was seeking it at that moment. And like, and in the way of like, and of all the doctrine that had been shoved down my throat, and all the ways of like, don't ask this question, this is the answer. Don't ask that question, this is the answer. Like, when all of those questions mattered, and I had to come to a point of like, none of this is reconcilable for me anymore. If that is the truth, and I'm putting that's such a big thing to say, and if she were to ever to listen to this, like, it was a me, it wasn't a you, you know?
You don't want her being like, no, I shouldn't have said that.
No, and I needed to hear it in that way, because she, knowing her, that's not what she meant, I don't think, you know? Like, I think that there was another way that she was trying to portray what she was meaning. But in that moment, I heard it in a way that like rocked my world. And I would like I was like, you don't, and I was like freaking out, like my team and everything. I was like, you don't understand. Because nobody else on my team, it was like, cool, yeah, everybody's trying to work through sin. But it was like, I felt like I was working against the core of my being. So I was like, I don't care. You could put a lit spoon of heroin in a syringe in front of me, and I will not take that. That is not a thing. That is like, you're putting sin in front of me, quote unquote. I have no desire for that sin. Right. So I will every time say, thank you, Tata, I'm not taking part in that sin. But you know what I mean? But at that time, like, if you put Jessica from youth group in front of me, that was an issue, right? Like,
but that's the difference too, of it's like, if someone's like trying not to steal, it's like, guess what? You don't have to steal to live or be who you are, you know? Instead, that's like a core piece of who someone is. And it makes a lot of sense to me, because when you think, like, when you drive home the idea that literally how Paul talked about, if Jesus didn't die, if Jesus wasn't this, you know, complete figure the way he said he was, then all of this is worthless, right? That's what was driven home. That's what I taught all the time. And it was once the pieces of who Jesus was started unraveling, it's like there was nothing left anymore. I love that imagery of like the tink on the top of the glass, and just that I always describe it as like the floor just completely like dissolved underneath me, and I fell through because it was all gone. And
Yeah.
then what do you do? Right. You kind of rebuild, who you are in that sense. What did it look like as you stepped away from that? Was it just like a overnight, like I'm gone, or was that a process for you of like leaving the church and finding your own path
I
after
was
that moment?
trying to make it a process, and then like one day it was like gone. So it was
And
like
they helped with that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so at that point, like was not allowed to speak to the woman that like had the relationship with why I got kicked out and all of this stuff. And then she kind of resurfaced in my life. And then I was still singing on worship teams. And I was like, I thought, so after conversion therapy, I was like, cool, where are the dudes?
I'm not gay no more. Have you seen that? Have you seen that video? I like men's.
Yeah. It's a raining man.
I love that one. I'm not gay no more.
Yeah. And then, so I was like, oh, I did have a very sweet and significant, friendship with, my best friend's brother, who like, and he would never, I don't think that he would have ever looked at it like that. But there was this part of me that was like, oh, for the first time, but it didn't have to do with conversion therapy. It actually had to do with him. I was interacting with a man and masculinity in a way that was so kind that I hadn't really experienced before. And so there was while I was going through conversion therapy and doing that, it was like I did find myself having this moment with him that is still very special and very beautiful to me. Do I think that we could have ever, that's not something that would have like played out in my life, but I'm very grateful for it. And I've told him about that too. And I would tell him forever that he's always been a pivotal display of kind masculinity to me and godly masculinity to me. But cool. Aside from that, like when I re-encountered the woman that I had gotten kicked out and all those things, it was like, shit. I was like, that is still such a thing. And
yeah.
So
it started confirming some things where you're like,
yeah,
I fixed this.
Yeah. And then it was like, oh shit. And then I was still singing. And then it was like, she had moved to Kansas City. And then it was like, okay, well, I can't sing on state on the, worship teams anymore. It was too hard. I felt like I was lying. And then I was like, okay, I'll do the music program. So like they had a music academy and I was like, okay, I'll do that. So I'm not going to be like on stage. And then I was still talking to her and I was living in a house with other women at IHOP. And then they ended up kicking me out because they knew that I was having this, friendship with that woman. And then it was just like, okay, fuck everyone. Like, I'm out. I'm out. I'm done. Literally, it was like I went home for Christmas and then came back. And then it was like I moved in with her, got a job at TGI Fridays, never went back to IHOP, and was like literally within a week, like went and like got this serving job and was like, hi, this is my girlfriend.
That's wild.
But it was like, I had no idea what I was doing, who I was. I was so terrified of the world. I was so scared of this. I was so scared of gay people, Miguel. Like
they might get you.
Tell you.
They might get you. They might get you gay on you.
Yeah. And just like, oh my gosh, this, whatever. And then it was like, I was so afraid of my own community that it was like, it was such a wild time. And then, so I was just like, yeah, fuck everything, basically, there for a minute. And then
seems to be almost part of the process for a lot of people, minimum leaving the church, but then also leaving that kind of dogmatic piece that shut down like the core of their homosexuality, like of who they are as a person. When I hear different people's stories, it's like everyone kind of hits up on this, like, okay, fuck off. Everybody can fuck off.
Yeah. The coolest thing though is like, even so much that keeps coming up in my mind right now is like surrounding fear, right? Of like, the biggest thing that like got me free was understanding that I did not have to be afraid of being wrong. Like the millstone that's going around your neck if you lead people astray as a leader in the body of Christ, like it's so much worse for you if you're a leader and you and you lead people astray, and you know, it's like there's so much fear, not even that, but just in even having a relationship with God in general, of like what it means to, are you like the concepts of heaven and hell, even there's so much fear. When I was able to finally stop being afraid of letting myself keep looking, and then also like had to not be afraid of being wrong on the path of finding that again. And then also like in that freedom of being able to seek, of like letting myself look at things that might open up spirituality to me again, you know, in these different ways, or like, okay, what was it that I was seeking? What was it that I actually found in those spaces that is not lost? Like that was a big thing for me too, of like, I felt like I had wasted so much time and in this and whatever, but like remembering that I was finding deep connection with something that was profoundly real. It was just packaged in things that, you know, maybe had things that weren't all the way true. And
or maybe got
so it's
hijacked
like,
in a way, you know, like
yeah,
it got hijacked
yeah,
for somebody's purpose, whoever that person may have been.
yeah. Even being like, even so, like, even to be able to come back around at this point. So it was like, you know, plant medicines became a huge thing for me, you know, in like ceremonial settings of like psychedelics. So there's been a lot of things that have reopened my mind to possibilities that I was touching and seeking something that is very real. And so even now, the fear that wants to come up for me is like talking now in this place, like speaking now, coming back full circle of being like, the biggest thing that was profound for me was to give myself permission again to believe in Jesus.
Yeah.
Right? Which is insane. So it's like, or for us, like,
You're
to
like
that to
circle.
come full
Yeah.
circle back around, right? Like it doesn't look the same. It doesn't look whatever. It's like, it's not even, I wouldn't even put that out there in this way of like, it's gonna look or tell the same story as anybody in, you know, our background or whatnot. But even to be able to search out and like, even if I'm not looking for the same story, I'm now looking for the spirit of who they were talking about. I'm looking for the history of the man. I'm looking for remembering my connection with something that was profound, like my friend. Yeah, like
how do I get there?
like, and being able to like, and being confident that I don't have to be afraid of like even my spiritual friends, or like all these new things of like, oh, okay, like a couple of years ago, it's like the thought of saying that out loud was like so crazy to me.
Yeah, it'd
You
be
know?
wild for me to do that. I've shared with you
Yeah.
where I've hit on some situations where people like really got me up in arms real quick, where I was like, what are we talking about right
Yeah.
now?
And it's so, there's so many, I just, my biggest hope would be for everyone who seeks in that way. You know what I mean? Like everyone who is on whatever their path is of looking either outside of themselves, or hopefully pulling that to be looking inside of themselves for the thing that they think is out there. Like, remember what moves you and why it moved you. Don't remember who told you that it should move you.
Right. Well, and I
Like
think
that.
that's a piece, the component of like organized religion, especially, is the, well, you touched on it earlier, like the manipulation. that can happen, you know,
Yeah.
when someone's not actively thinking for themselves and actively searching out whatever it is. It is interesting because it's like over time, I've had to go through similar steps. I don't think I've landed necessarily where you might be now, but making peace. Like, well, I think my wife said it really well, where she's like, you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right?
Yeah.
One night when we were in conversation, because I was just like, fuck it all, burn it all down.
But you
And
have to,
see,
burn it
it's
all
part of
down.
the process
Otherwise,
in a sense.
yeah, you have to.
And see what's left standing
Yeah.
at the end. You know, what's the core, what's the foundation?
Yeah.
Because there is something, I think, even when you look at like music, which eventually we'll get to in here, but this is like, so this topic is so fascinating to me. There is this experience that people are hungry for, you know, and even like I think about worship, where there's times I wish I like Christmas, right? I love Christmas Eve service. I actually thought about doing like a bunch of old hymns on like on our band page just because I love singing that shit.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because I was about to go do a Christmas show, and it was a public Christmas show at the shopping center. And I sent my set list in, and it was all Christian songs. Me, the atheist, I chose all these like hymns and shit. I was like, I haven't sang this shit in like years. This stuff's good. And they ended up coming back and saying, you can't do those here. I found it so hilarious.
Wow.
I was like, I don't even believe in this, but this is kind of crazy. Like, it's literally Christmas.
Yeah.
And even the promoter was like, I'm sorry. And so we ended up singing like with the band, because there was no time to change the set list. It was like the night before they pulled this thing. And so I just texted the band, like, what do y'all know? And we just threw a bunch of songs. We literally sang Superstition from Stevie Wonder because that was one of the ones the whole band knew. So I'm like, this is hilarious. I forget. Well, and I think I forgot where my train of thought was going on that, but I think I found it. I think this was the thread of just the idea, like there's experiences and emotions that are beautiful. And I know I wouldn't be the person who I am today. And it's mainly just, it gave me a chance to have mentors, which I don't think a lot of people do. And I was lucky enough that a good handful of them, or some of them weren't great mentors, are good people. A good handful of them really are. Like, even though we disagree on a lot of things now, I still look back and I'm like, no, like I've benefited a lot from that, you know?
Yeah.
And there's something powerful there.
Yeah.
For you, what is that? So spiritually speaking, what does that journey look like for you? Is it a practice for you right now? Is it just like a meditation for you? Is it a community? What does that look like for you now?
A little bit of all of it. It's so like at this exact present moment, it's honestly, it's not a lot of practice. Like, it's not like I didn't wake up today and do breath work. I didn't meditate. I didn't, check in with a church leader or what, but before I started this podcast, I, went outside on my deck and smoked a cigarette and took a deep breath and was like, let's do it. Let's talk. It's like, it's just, it's an always there. It's an always thing. I have this always, it's a constant focus on gratitude for me. I have this thing of like, there's so often that I find myself, even now in these states of like, where I'll find myself, I'm like, I want to pray, but I don't necessarily know what to say. But I know that my soul is like wanting to get something out in that exact same way of connection. And sometimes I won't know what to say, but I'll say on repeat, I say, thank you. I love you. Thank you. I love you. And for that's such a full and complete prayer for me at this point in my life. Because it's like, there's so much going out in the thank you, in the gratitude of like the gratitude outside of me, the gratitude to myself, the gratitude within me. And then the I love you, it's the same thing. It's going outside of me and it's going within myself. And it's like at some point I get in this like trance like state with it sometimes, of where I can't even then tell if I'm saying it to this beautiful presence outside of me, or if I'm saying it to myself, or if I'm saying it to the God within me. And then I just like, then I'm saying it to everything at the same time. And then you get on the podcast.
Well, and
You know, it's
it
like,
is huge.
it's so,
That
it's just,
idea
it
of
has
saying,
to be, it has to be that simple. It has to be that engaging, and it has to be that I feel like meditating right now after this podcast, because I'm like, I want to go into a space of gratitude because of our conversation.
Yeah.
It's an overflow of, wow, this was great. And then I feel like there's this part of me that wants to like connect with this thing that we're connecting with each other. You know, it's like, it's just something that I don't separate anymore.
Yeah.
From yeah, when it became this thing that was so separate before, and this thing that was outside of me that I had to scrub away to be able to access. And I don't see that anymore. I don't feel that anymore. I know that I can touch it with dirty hands or not.
Right. That's awesome. I love it. And there is a power of, like, meditation is actually, as a practice, a very big part of my life. It is funny because I find myself, like, prayer was previously, and I even this morning thought, like, sitting down to meditate, I was like, this is very similar to like my incessant need to pray when I was a follower. But I was like, it almost doesn't seem like the day is right. But there is a power in those moments of just saying, I love you. And accepting that even for ourselves. And because I don't think it's a thing that is said probably enough even to ourselves, you know, and it can be a powerful thing. When it comes to the musical journey, because in that thread, as you told that story, the whole time is this music piece though. And this passion for it, clear, strong talent, and focus. How has that looked for you? How did it change for you when you stepped out of doing it all in the context of worship, and then now eventually to Flat Susan, but I imagine there's a lot of iterations before there.
For sure.
What did that look like?
Oh man. It looked like not playing for a while. Yeah, for sure. Like when I, originally left and got my TGI Fridays job, I was like, no, this and not, I didn't even have the thought of like learning and singing a secular song or like something that wasn't, it was just like all of that was like, okay, cool, whatever.
And this song is about what? I can't sing that.
Yeah. Oh, and I totally missed, but you were asking me before about something that gave me permission, was a person, like my best friend, Rochelle. She was very much there and was just like, you're okay. This is okay. And like, it's okay, and like, there was such a, relief with that too. And then she inevitably, she saw me go through my process of, kind of like leaving IHOP and, all of that. And then she brought me back around to like playing music again. Cause she sings and, doesn't really actively do it out or anything like that, but beautiful singer and songwriter. And so she got me this, she was like, oh, play this little, Christmas party or something with me. And I was like, okay, cool. So we played, and then it was like reignition. And then, she knew she just had to
get you over there,
and then
get you over the line.
Yeah. And then we did a couple shows together, and she was like, I don't actually really I don't want to do this. Like, you just go ahead,
Good now.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, cool. And then it was like a slow trickle of I got my first paid gig outside of the church. It was like $140
right.
As this bar called TJ's Over the Edge in Blue Springs. And I was like, oh no shit. And then it was like slowly letting myself write, and then fall in love and let that be okay. And then all of, and then it's just been that process of, again, forsaking the like churchy stuff and go as, gung ho in whatever I needed to work out. And then, and now I'm just like, again, it's like none of it's separate for me now. Now it's not like, oh, I'm going to play a worship song, so I'm going to get in a worship mode. It's like, I'll play anything that I'm playing. To me at this point, like, I want everything that I'm doing to be that. So it's like, it doesn't matter what I'm singing or what, I mean, you can't say that. Like, obviously there would be things that are like, okay, this ain't the juice. but a lot of things, especially with Flat Susan, it's like all fucking, positivity. We're obsessed with each other. We're like wanting to gain access to the juice of life with each other. And like, right. It's all encouraging. It's all moving forward. And so it's like, if I get on stage with Flat Susan and we're singing a song, we're singing 420 Queen written by Nikki White, there is in my soul the same amount of love and passion pushing out to everybody who hears it.
Yeah.
As if I was singing, like, shout to the Lord. Like, it has to be that, or otherwise, what am I doing? And do I actually, like, is it real for me to live my life in that space of connection all the time? Or do I have to do it in the building? Do I have to do it the way they said, Well,
that's interesting. I spent about a year, like, diving into Buddhism. I wouldn't call myself a Buddhist by any means, but there's a lot of things I feel like I've stolen from their practices. But that is one piece that there was like one monk who was challenging people. He was teaching about meditation, where meditation is less the sitting down, and meditation is more like, can you connect while you're, in the kitchen, making soup? Can you connect in these everyday parts of life, not just in the spiritual practice? And something about that really struck a chord with me, because like, even I even sensed myself trying to go down this hole of like, now I'll meditate for an hour every day and reach nirvana. Like, of course I applied,
I'm so there with you.
Yeah. But then it was like, oh no, what does it look to be present? When my wife and I are on a date, what does it look to be present? When I'm like, one time I was actually playing, I remember I look up because there's actually mountains sitting on my screensaver. That's anyone watching. But I remember we were playing a show is way up north, like, was that upstate New York? Like, looking over the lake was Canada, and we're playing this festival. And I was trying to learn how to like just be present at every moment. And I remember I literally stopped playing, and like, I was way too present at that moment. I need to like bring it back in, bro. but again, that concept of what does it look like to apply, for me, I talk about it as like presence, my presence in every area, in every place. And that can be a powerful thing instead of just this one little hall. What excites you about Flat Susan? What's the most exciting thing to you about what you guys got going on?
It just really feels like magic. Like, there's we are so lucky to be artists in Kansas City. Like, if you're not from Kansas City and like don't play music here, like, there is something special about this community. We just rock with each other, like in a way that seems very different from a lot, like definitely like coastal towns or like, your big competitive markets. And so within that too, to have 5 women, and we're not just 5 women who like play music. We're all frontmen. Like, we're all,
you all are like power. When someone was telling me the line, it's Daniel, when he first talked to me about what you guys are doing, he was telling me the lineup. He's like, bro, you got to check out Flat Susan. That's what, and I'm like, but they're all like badasses. It's like, yes.
Yeah,
he's like, that's why you got to go see them, man.
It's so fun, and even Lauren, like, she'd be like, oh, I'm not a lead singer, but like, Lauren is a front man, dude. Like, that girl is the show,
there's
it's
a charisma.
Like,
she carries,
and so it's just, it's so incredible I'm so excited about the music that we're writing, the music that we're learning to take and make our own. But like we have a song called Sue Villain that we are so proud of, and it's like this deep song, like, you know, kind of on the like Earl Had to Die vein of like, I guess, type of inspo, but it's so different from that. And it's this depth of like each of us took a verse and wrote from this place of pain and revenge and freedom, essentially. You know, and it's like we wrote about this girl gang of like the five of us of like, we're coming to get you because of what you did. And so each of us are giving this incredibly vulnerable snapshot into these like intense things, especially as women that we're talking about. You know, we're talking about like, mine is about like deep pain and abuse in the church, and you know, and there's like all of us that we're talking about abuse, we're talking about trauma, we're talking about deep things, especially as women. And it's like the fact that we are able to do that and then all be on stage and look at each other and know who we are to each other off stage. It's like this group of women has become my family. Like we ride for each other and in all of the ways. And so to get on stage for y'all to see who we are backstage, like makes that everything. And it's like, my life is so enriched by who we are together off stage that it's like, man, when we get up there or when we sit down or when we hit those harmonies, when we open our mouths together, it's like this thing of it feels like magic, and it feels like we are touching that thing that is bigger than us, and that moves people, and that people look at us, and I hope people can look at us and be like, damn, they have something, and they matter to each other in a way that's profound. And look at those women that are not clawing at each other and being so competitive, and they're all we're doing is putting on wigs and trying to be as 100% ourselves as we can, you know. And that's the thing to me. It's like there's so much about the music, but it's just who we are as friends, honestly, is like the coolest thing in the world to me.
Well, I think that's what makes a great band, is that chemistry, you know. And I think that's the hard thing. You can't fake it. And it takes like the natural connection on top of actual work, you know, to navigate through things. But I think when you can find it, like grabbing a hold of it as hard as you can is such a cool thing. And yeah, and I feel like seeing you guys the first time at Boulevardia, I feel like that overflows in your stage performance, and you guys backstage and everything as well. You can just tell the energy started building, and like you guys just started like bouncing off each other. And then you get on stage and it just opens up. What do you look forward to the most this upcoming year, 2025, for Flat Susan?
Original shows. I think we're really going to try and take we really want to be able to pull back from kind of doing a lot of like, we all have to do it, right? We got to do the you know, the other shows, and we love that. That's how we've all been alive and made a career, right? But the exciting thing this year is we're really going to focus on the writing and like getting out the original music. And then even if we're not playing out as much, I think we're still going to try and do the like our once a month Flat Friday at the end of the month, either if it's not an original show where we're out, and we'll do like live streaming and stuff like that. And so we just really want to
Flat Friday
kind of hone in on that and get out some origi tunes.
I love it. Well, for the last two questions of the podcast, right now in your life, how would you define living a great life?
A great life to me looks very simple right now. Like as in like the day-to-day, like trying to make it in music is always this hustle of like, who do I have to show you that I am? How do I prove to you that I'm good enough to book me here? How do I, whatever, how do, you know, it's like, okay, I released this song. How do I, you know, get it competitively active on the playlist? How am I moving here? How do I get this PR? How do I, you know, of all of the doing. And I am happily in a relationship this year, and that is very simple and very easy, and that has like, I don't know, I guess slowed me down in a way of, and not slowed me down as in like, okay, pumping the brakes on career, but like slowed me down in the busyness of what that looks like to actually have a life that I love. Right. And who I am, like, who am I when I show up for her? Who am I when I show up for my band? Who am I when I show up for myself? You know, am I like lost in the busyness of the bullshit that we think that we have to be doing to like make a post? Yes, all of those things matter and they're so important and we have to do them.
Right.
But like for me, life, like even looking out at like 2025, I'm like, I'm not foreseeing hundreds of shows for myself this year. I'm not foreseeing this massive platform takeoff. Do I hope those things happen? Absolutely. But those things, like, I feel like they're only going to happen when my settled peace is like as full as I can make it. Yeah. And so like and to me that looks more quiet than it has in a long time. It looks like me being a little more still than I have in a long time to make moves that matter in a much bigger way rather than the busyness of this, I don't know, the busyness of the minute dopamine hits. Yes. I guess. Yeah.
That's funny. It makes me think of two things. One is the anxiety I have because the end of the year, I decided for 2 weeks, I'm just going to take all that time off from trying to do content so I can do like some other stuff business wise that we need to get done in the bank. Yeah. But there's so much anxiety. Like I feel like just keep like, bro, you're going to fall off. Like you can't do this. But I'm like, no, self, this will be fine. You're setting up things for a better, like a more easy, not easy, but I guess more smooth future. And then it also makes me think of, I love swimming. And when I first started swimming, it was just like mayhem. I'm just like pounding through the water. My legs are going everywhere. But like the more I ended up getting a coach in swimming, and she was teaching me, like basically by the end of that coaching with her, I was moving as little as possible, but going much faster and swimming much further. And it was all about getting the right pieces, and slow as smooth as fast is kind of what the mantra is when I'm swimming. And I think it is a powerful testament to what you're talking about. It's like, it's a little more like calm, a little more like this, but I think it opens us up to see opportunities better instead of like just fucking banging shit around. Cause I'm more of a bang shit around guy, but after a while it starts to hurt,
Yeah. But the bang shit around guy never gets to be fully where he is. Right. Yes. Like that's what you were talking about, of that, like being like having it be the thing of where you're so present on a date with your wife, like
instead of like sneaking in a response to a Instagram post, which I have done on dates, it's like, it's like, that's
because you're work, because it's work, right? Because it's work and you can't, and it's like, which you're not going to knock you for that. Sure. It gets annoying every once in a while, but like, he's working, he's doing his thing, but like, there's such a difference.
Like, I could probably do that tomorrow. Right. Yeah. Yeah, you could.
Yeah.
Well, for the last question, how would you define creating great things?
Be as authentic as you can. Like creating great things are creating things that like through the fear, through the like, I want to like do weird ass improv fucking comedy videos, man. Like, and then like, why haven't I done that all the way yet? Because I'm like, that's not like, it hasn't been my brand yet. That hasn't been, this or whatever. Or I'm scared to just like while out and like, what if they all flop and then nothing? And then it's like, okay, I do this for 6 months and then it's like, cool, Amanda tried to be funny. scary. But then,
Right?
but like, who cares, right? Then who cares? What if, like, worst case scenario, Amanda is not funny. She tried to make these videos. She had a really good time thinking that she was funny while she made the videos. And then, the internet didn't really agree. And those will be out there forever on the internet, never to be able to taken down fully or scrubbed. And that's fine. Who cares? Who cares? No, but like, that's the thing. It's like, I want to do those things. And I think that those things could be great. What is the thing holding me back? I'm scared to look like an asshole.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do we really break through and just try, like, just in full expression, as authentic as you can be in the moment, knowing you might be wrong, knowing it might not pop off, people might not like it, but like, so much, you have to try. Like, don't be afraid of looking like an asshole.
I love it.
And an asshole in the way of like, oh, that was dumb. Oh, with you. Be afraid of looking like an asshole if you're being an asshole.
Being an asshole.
But yeah, but it's different,
Don't be afraid to look like an asshole, but don't be an asshole.
Exactly.
Right? Is that the...
Exactly.
I love it. Well, and I think of so many times where I've held myself back just out of fear of what someone else would think. And some of the artists that I look up to the most, that is one of the threads that's like going throughout every single one of them. They are just painfully themselves. And sometimes even that, like Kanye West to this day, I know he got canceled, but he's one of my favorite, most influential artists on me. But he is painfully himself, whether you like it or not. And there's times like we're all like, what the fuck? Why? Why? But I think letting out, like, especially when it comes to the art and the content, just letting it go. Neil Gaiman is an author, and he talks about like creativity. He's like, just about the time that you feel like you're standing naked in front of or standing in your underwear in front of a crowd is you're probably just starting to touch authenticity. And it's like, then you go fuller and you go deeper into that. So we'll let everyone know how to connect with you, how to keep up with Flat Susan as you guys keep going on this journey.
Yeah. And I'll say just one thing, that's why people are so attracted to Kanye. It's because
Donda
of the authenticity. Oh yeah, Donda. I moved them together. But like, I'm a big in vibration, and like, and they're from my studies, if you will. The one thing that vibrates higher than love is authenticity. And so it's like, live in truth, whatever that looks like to you. What that looks like to Kanye is what we all see it look like to Kanye, but you can't stop watching that dude, because you're like, he is one, that's like, sure, take what he says with a grain of salt, don't, whatever. But like, that dude, you can never say that Kanye is not being authentic to whatever Kanye thinks at the moment, So it's like, as authentic to you and yourself and your people as you can be. Like, that's it. That's the juice.
That's awesome. But yeah, let everyone know. It's Flat Susan official.
Oh yeah. FlatSusan.com.
Oh, FlatSusan.com.
Flat Susan official on Instagram.
That's where I got the
yeah, and then just Flat Susan on Facebook. There's not really many other things that go by Flat Susan, so it'll be hard. You'll be hard pressed to miss us.
When I was searching for it, I literally thought, this is like SEO gold. Flat Susan. That's been.
I know. We need to do all the work on the other hand too. We got a lot. We got the work to do on that side too, to make sure that it stays ours. But it is.
Yeah, it is definitely gold. My first band in college, we called ourselves The Rest of Us, which was the worst band name for SEO, because there was like, like coffee for the rest of us, beer for the rest of everything was for the rest of us. It was terrible. But well, thanks for making the time. I appreciate it.
Yeah. No, this was great.
Thank you for listening to the Live and Create podcast. If you like what you heard, make sure you subscribe and leave a comment or a review.
The Live and Create podcast.